So you want to create a 3D artwork, but you don't know what to create. You don't have any 2D drawing skills to scribble down some ideas. Well, in this video I show you how you can come up with a cool idea for your 3D artwork by simply browsing the web and collecting some nice images. Didn't sound too complicated, right? It isn't, so let's get started. So before we get started, I'm using a tool called PureRef, which you can find on pureref.com to show you all this stuff I'm showing you in this video. If you want to know how to use PureRef, check out the next video. This won't be part of this video here. So, first of all, I don't recommend to simply grab an image of another artist online and simply recreate it one-to-one. Certainly, if you have the permission of the other artist, you can do this. But what I do recommend is to grab images from other artists and remix them into your own artwork by adding your own twist to it and mixing different elements of different artworks into your own idea, into your own artwork. Before you get started with an artwork, you should ask yourself, what is the purpose on creating this artwork? In best case, this shouldn't be just a random thing. So put some intention into it to make it something which you can grow from and improve your skills to get to the next level somehow. So maybe you want to learn a new software, which you probably do right now with this course here. But why not creating something which you can use for your portfolio? But you should think about what you want to put into your portfolio in order to show your skills, your ability to reflect what you want to do with your art. Maybe you just want to inspire people or tell little stories, but maybe you're aiming to get a job at someday. But then you should focus on the thing you want to do. Like if you want to become a character artist, you should create characters, certainly. And you should focus on showing and improving your skills as character artist. In this way, it's much easier to find inspiration for the topics you want to use in your artworks. If you're doing this just for fun or don't find any inspiration at all, I recommend to join online art challenges like we do with our CG Boost challenge, where we announce a topic and you should create a 3D artwork related to this topic. So you are limited in a certain way. We give you a frame to work in and you just have to find an idea within this frame, which is much easier to do other than having all the possibilities of the whole world and the universe and beyond. So first of all, think about why you want to create your artwork. In my case, I wanted to create a 3D scene where beginners can learn all the important tools Blender has to offer while creating something that looks cool and they can be proud of. So overall, the scene shouldn't be too complicated to recreate, but on the other hand, it should look really cool. So with that in mind, I started to look for some inspiration. And I found this image here from Andrei of this cool Soviet car, which I found quite inspiring. And I thought this could be a cool object to recreate in a beginner workshop. But everybody who knows me, I like to add like robot legs or thrusters on ordinary cars to make them look a little bit more extraordinary. And that's why I came up with the idea to make this a flying car. And so I found this cool image to get some ideas on how this could look like, which looks pretty amazing with these sci-fi technical stuff underneath the cars. And since I wanted to also show animation in this course, I wanted to create an animated scene. So I thought if I create a flying car, we need some environmental stuff. But all in all, we mainly want to focus on the car. So the environment should be pretty simple, but still look cool. And so I found this, which had these nice rocks here, which also is pretty cool for learning some modeling techniques. But all in all, if you think about a desert, for example, there is not much going on. There are these rocks and maybe some plants and everything else is sand. So the whole scene is pretty simple, but with these nice rocks, it could look quite interesting as well. So these three images are forming the base idea of the image I created in my head. So don't underestimate your brain or your imagination, because if you just look at these images, your imagination is building some cool stuff already and combining these images into something new. So when you're done with getting your inspiration for the basic idea for your 3D artwork, So the next thing you should think about is what art style you want to use to bring your idea to life. So, and since I wanted to create a beginner-friendly scene, it should be somehow minimalistic. And the best way to go is this typical low poly style, because the objects are pretty simple to create. You can create many different variations of your objects pretty quickly, change your objects and so on without spending hours on creating everything. And creating like a full realistic looking car takes a lot of time, and it's probably way too much to start your journey as 3D artist. So this low poly look is really good if you just want to start out, but even as advanced users, it's a lot of fun to create low poly scenes, since you can achieve quite impressive stuff in no time. So I gathered some images here from ArtStation to get an idea how this low poly look or a car in this low poly look could look like. And that's basically the art style I want to use. So the next step is to think about the mood of your image. Mood is a perfect tool to elicit emotion in the viewer, and this makes people look at your image even longer and dive deeper into it. And mood is mainly controlled by color and light. And I found these images here which basically represented the mood I wanted to have in my image. So you can see this yellowish to pinkish, bluish colors which fit really nicely together. So this, as you can see here, is really combined with this sunset feeling, which I also wanted to show in my image. So, and the last thing I did before I started my 3D scene was to gather some more references, mainly for the car. The good thing was that this guy here had the name of the car, so I easily could find some reference images of the car on Pixabay or on Flickr, and also I found this nice blueprint which I will use later on to actually model the car in Blender. And I also found this nice image of these rocks here to get some idea how these rocks could look like. Okay, now we have the style, the mood, we have some references and the base idea of the scene. But in the end, there's one important ingredient missing, and this is the storytelling part. So storytelling doesn't always mean you actually have to tell a story, like in a book, for example, or in a movie. Storytelling means to give the viewer inspiration so that they can build their own stories inside of their head. I added the luggage up here so that you get the feeling that this car is on the road, and then it's flying to this desert scene, which makes me think about, okay, where is this car flying to? Who is this car flying, and what is this world around this car? Why this car has this sci-fi elements to it? So this makes it way more interesting to look at this image and to think about or dive deeper into this image so that you can imagine a whole story behind this. So even a simple scene like this can tell a story. Yeah, guys. And as you can see, I didn't create a concept art or scribble or anything like that. Only these images here helped me to build this scene down here. So the next time you want to create a 3D artwork or even a 2D artwork, browse through ArtStation, Pinterest, or whatever site you like. Collect images for inspiration, for your general idea, for the style, for the mood, reference images as modeling foundation, and think about the story you want to tell with your image. And all in all, keep in mind what the purpose of your 3D artwork is you want to create. In this video, we take a look at a very nice free tool called PureRef, which allows you to quick and easily collect reference images for your 3D scene. You can download PureRef under pureref.com. Simply click on download. And you can either decide to donate some money if you have some and want to give the developers some love. I definitely recommend this. But if you just want to download this for free, just enter 0 and click on download. And then the download starts, and then simply install the software. This is how PureRef looks when you open it. It's basically a blank canvas. You can press Ctrl H for additional help, for example, the mouse control, which is quite useful. But here are some very basic things. You can resize the window here. You can hold down a right click and move the window around. and you can right click to get the context menu where you basically can find all the options and settings you need. You can see we don't have this standard Windows or Mac border with a close button and all this stuff, but you can find it here, and if you know all the nice shortcuts, you can also use them, for example. But we will go over these settings later on. First of all, we need some images. And basically, you just need to drag and drop images into PureRef. So on the one hand, you can just do it as you probably expected from your file browser. Simply drag and drop an image here. Then let's zoom back a bit. Then it's inside here. The canvas is basically unlimited, so you can place the images wherever you want. After you have added your first image, you can move the canvas inside of PureRef around by holding down the middle mouse button, that means the mouse wheel, and then you can basically move the canvas around, and with the mouse wheel you can simply zoom in and out. And there's even a cooler way to drag and drop images into PureRef, by drag and dropping them from your internet browser. So for example, here I'm on my ArtStation portfolio. Let's simply click on this image, drag and drop, and put it over here. How cool is that? Let's add some more images. So now we have a bunch of images, and in order to arrange these images, for now just manually, you can select them with left click and then hold down left click to move them around. And as you can see, this lighter gray area is basically the canvas, and if you place your images in the darker area, the canvas will adjust automatically. So we can easily place these images here. So besides adding images, you certainly can also use some standard shortcuts. For example, to delete images, select them, hit delete, and they are gone. With Ctrl Z, you can undo things, and with Ctrl Shift Z, you can redo. You also find it in the context menu, right click and then over here. And as you can see, you can also simply Ctrl C copy an image and Ctrl V paste it. Then besides images, we can also add nodes, either by right clicking and clicking here on node, or press Ctrl N. Simply type in whatever you want to add here, and then you can over here change the text color if you like. And down here you can change the background color. So let's change this to a lighter color and change the opacity here. And then you can easily change the text. So now you can see all these elements are bigger and smaller. And the cool thing is we can also transform them. That means we can not only move them around. First of all, we can select multiple by holding down Shift and then left click on multiple images, then release Shift, and then you can simply with left click and hold move them around. And we can also transform the images by holding down Ctrl Alt left click to scale the images. Works also if you have multiple selected, which is super nice. You can hold down Ctrl left click to rotate your images. Works the same way with text. And you can select an image, hold down Shift Alt, and then left click and drag in a certain direction to flip the image. Works also up and down, which can be also quite useful sometimes. Also works with multiple images, as you can see. So there's one thing I noticed which you should take care of. If you, for example, select an image or a text, add a new node, for example, this node is automatically a child object of this previous selected element. That means if I select this and move this around, you can see the node now sticks to this image. This can be useful, but sometimes you do it accidentally and this can be frustrating. To solve this problem, you basically have to select the node, Ctrl C, deselect everything, Ctrl V to paste it, and delete the original. And now, as you can see, it's not connected anymore. So now let's take a look in the context menu. Right click. You can see we have some settings over here. I don't want to go over all these settings here. You can look through them. You can change the colors here. We also have a light theme. You can make this transparent. stuff like this. I leave the dark theme. You can change the shortcuts if you like. You can also take a look inside the shortcuts. But yeah, I don't want to go deeper into these. But down here we can find some interesting stuff. First of all, let's take a look at image. Here you have some nice options to arrange or align your images and also to normalize. Normalize I find quite cool. So let's, for example, normalize the height. Everything will have the same height. This works only if you don't have anything selected. But for example, if you just select these 3 images, then normalize the height. All of them have now the same height, which is quite useful. Also, if we like to arrange them nicely, we can right click, arrange, and then, for example, optimal. Then the tool tries to arrange them nicely. Then we can also optimize the canvas, for example, click on optimize. This is useful if you want to export this image as JPEG or anything like that, so that you don't have a large empty space. This you can simply do by right clicking, save, export, and then selected images, all images, or the whole scene. And here you can also save your PureRef file. That means all the arrangements you have done here, you can simply save and reopen inside of PureRef. So yeah, check out these options, everything you have here. You can do some other stuff. I only want to show you one more thing. So I just opened up Blender, and if you are, for example, just working with one screen, it can be useful to have your PureRef references always on top of Blender. And this you can easily do. Just right click, mode, and then click on always on top. And now I can simply resize this. And now you probably understand even better why we don't have this close button and all this stuff up here. So PureRef is really nicely minimalistic. And I can place it somewhere here. And now I can start working inside Blender. And if I don't need the editor down here, this can be quite useful. And if you want to have this on your second screen, for example, in full screen, you can also simply right click, window, and then maximize, and then you have PureRef as full screen. You can also double click on images to full screen the images, simply scroll the mouse wheel to get back. So there are a bunch of more options. As mentioned, check out the modes, window, canvas, and images. Play around with these settings. This tool can do much more than you think in the first place. But yeah, I don't want to make this video too long. In this video we take a look on how to add modeling reference images to Blender's 3D viewport. The easiest way to add a background image to Blender 3D viewport is by simply dragging and dropping it from an external folder into Blender's viewport. And as you can see, as soon as I release my mouse, on this exact spot the new image will be added. The first thing you need to know is that these images here are simply 3D objects. That means you can use all the standard selection and transformation tools. If I, for example, click on the Move tool and set the Transform Orientation to Local, we can see the axis of this image. So I can click on this and move this around, for example. And if I know the shortcuts, I can press Alt-G, for example, for resetting the position, and Alt-R for resetting the rotation. Now let's rotate this on the x-axis 90 degrees. And if you want to scale this image, you can either just press S to use the standard scaling operation, or if you hover your mouse above the edges or the corners of the image, you have the scaling bounding box. You can left click and hold and basically scale your image if you like. So this image comes with a bunch of very useful options. To change them, click down here on the Object Data tab with a small image icon, and down here we have some options. So first of all, we can set the transparency. If I decrease this value, as you can see, this image will be transparent, which is really useful. Just a quick note from the future here. In later versions of Blender, before you can use the transparency, you have to enable the use alpha first. And then, as you can see, the transparency works as expected. Then we can change the offset, which is basically the offset to the origin of the object. If I move this around, you can see the origin basically is changing in relation to the image. So right now, just the image is shifting left and right, but the position of this origin, the center point, is changing. So if I now rotate, as you can see here, it's rotating around this point here and it's not in the center anymore. Same for up and down basically. And then we have the depth value. For this, let's hit Shift A, mesh, and quickly add a cube. Now as you can see, this cube is placed directly inside the image. Let's select the image. And here we have the depth values. The default value means that it is treated like a standard 3D object. If it is sticking inside the cube here, it will be displayed accordingly. If I switch this to front, for example, we can always see the image in front of all objects. This looks a bit weird because it's not really possible in real life, but this can be quite useful. For example, if I turn down the transparency, I can see all this information of the image in front of my 3D objects. And then we have the back option, which is basically the opposite. Now the image is always displayed behind all the 3D objects. Let's hide the cube. Then we have the sides. Both basically means we can see the image from front and back. If I click on front, we can only see the front side, and from behind it's hidden, as you can see. And if we click on back, it's the other way around. If you want to know what's the positive side of your image, basically the front side, if you set your transform orientation to local, the local axis, the z-axis here, the blue one, is showing in the front direction. And on the other side, as you can see, we don't have this arrow. That means this is the negative direction, or basically the back side of your image. And then we have these two options down here, which basically shows or hides the image inside perspective or orthographic projection mode. So for example, if I disable perspective, you can see it will be hidden here in the perspective projection. And if I switch over to orthographic, we can see it. And we can also do it the other way around. Now I can't see it in orthographic mode, but I can see it in perspective mode. So this can be really useful because most of the time I would recommend, especially if you want to use these modeling sheets, to use them in orthographic mode. That means I would disable perspective and enable orthographic. And now if I hit numpad 1, for example, and now I can see it in orthographic projection from the front side. And if I move around here and switch back to perspective mode and, for example, have my car here, then this image is not disturbing our view if we want to see the car in the perspective projection. Also, I would recommend to use the front depth option and just reduce the transparency and enable front side only. That means if we, for example, want to add an image for the back side of the car and change the view with numpad 9 to the back side, we can't see the image from the front side, which is really useful. So if you don't want to drag and drop these images into your 3D viewport, you can also add them manually by simply hitting Shift A, go to image, and either add a reference or a background image, which is basically the same object, just with a difference in the settings. So if you add a reference, add this image, basically, as you can see, it will be aligned to our view, and then all the default settings are enabled. If you want to add a background image to make the best use out of it, press numpad 1, for example, for a direct view in orthographic mode. Right now it's front view, but you can also use numpad 3, for example, for the right view, or numpad 7 for the top view. And then simply hit Shift A, image, background, click on this, and then as you can see, it will be automatically adjusted to orthographic projection mode only, front side only. In this case, the depth is set to back, but you can also set it to front if you like. And now it's only visible in orthographic mode. So if you're using Blender for a while now, you might ask yourself, is there a way to add a background image to the camera? Since in older versions before Blender 2.8, the whole background image were working differently, and there was an easy option to simply edit this to the camera. And certainly we have this option as well. As you can see, if I select a camera object, down here we have these background images in the object data tab of the camera. So let's enable background, click on add image, open, and double click on your image. And now if I switch into the camera view, you can see that this image will be displayed over here. Alright, now we want to set up the scene in order to start modeling our 3D car. For this, I deleted everything except the standard cube. Let's rename this cube, double click on the name, and let's call it car scale reference, because I want to scale this cube in a way that it is basically a bounding box we could place around the car. So if you know the name of your car, simply Google it and ask for the size, and then there are sites online where you can basically find all the information about this car you want to model. So what I do here, I press N, open the sidebar, and here under transform, we find the dimensions, which is basically the actual size of this cube. To understand this better, let's enable the move tool and let's set the transform orientation to local. That means we now can see all the axes on the object. And if I press numpad 1 to view it from front view, you can see that this is basically the green axis here, the y-axis. That means we have to change the y-axis to define the length of the car, which in my case is 3.765 meters. The width in this case is the x-axis, which is 1 meter and 49 centimeters. And the z-axis is the height, which is 1 meter and 42.5 centimeters. So in this scale reference, we basically only need for setting up the reference images for the car. So let's hide this menu here by pressing N. Let's go to front view, numpad 1, shift A, image, background, and let's simply add this image here. In the image settings, I set this to be front. Let's turn down the transparency to 0.25. And as you can see, since this was a background image, only orthographic is enabled. And now the first thing we need to do is we need to scale this image that the front view from this car basically fits inside this cube here. You can see right now it's scaling from this position here, and that's where we can make good use of the offset. So we can set the offset in a way that it's basically in the center of the front view here. And now if I scale, it's scaling from the center of this position here, which is way easier to scale. And since we are creating a very simple low poly car here, it doesn't matter if this is fitting perfectly into the cube here, but it should be relative in the center here. Use the line to adjust this. So now I want to set up the other sides for side, top and back view. And this we can simply do by duplicating this image, Shift D. Then for the back view, for example, we simply have to move it over here, that it's fitting. And all we need to do here is to change the side from front to back. That means if I now press Ctrl numpad 1, we will show it from the back side. And now, as you can see, we can only see the back side of this. Now let's duplicate this again. Let's change this back to front and rotate this along the local y-axis. So I press R, Y, 90 degrees. And now if I press numpad 3 for the side view, we can see this from the side and just move this image inside the rectangle here. So now the same thing for the top view. Shift D, Alt R for resetting the rotation. Let's go to top view. Let's rotate this and move this inside here. And now if I press numpad 1, 3, 7 or Ctrl 1, we have set up all the images we need. It can be that you don't have 4 views. Sometimes you only have like a front view and a side view and a back view. Just use what you have. So, and to keep organized, I renamed all these images here so that I know exactly which image belongs to which view. And I quickly rename the collection to helpers because these are all objects we don't want to use for rendering, so I can disable the render button and certainly I can hide them if I need to. And I would also recommend to disable all these mouse cursors here. That means we can't select these images anymore. And now we only can select the objects we are working on. So we don't accidentally move these images around or delete them. Just a quick note from the future here. Remember, in later Blender versions, you have to click on the filter symbol up here to enable or disable the certain restriction toggles, for example, for rendering and selecting. So these are disabled by default. Then you have to click here and enable them. So now don't forget to go to File, Save As. Let's call this car scene 01 and save as Blender file. In this video, we finally start the modeling exercise of the car. Here we will start with the first part of the body of the car. So enjoy. Alright, the background image is set up. It could be that the background image is not providing enough information. Sometimes these blueprints are very simple. That's why I've opened up PureRef on my second screen with some reference images of the car. Since these are photos from different angles, I get a better idea of some of those shapes. But in general, keep in mind that we are creating a very low resolution version of this car. That means we will ignore a lot of the details. So we still have the bounding box we used for setting up the reference images here. I think we don't need it anymore, but at this point I won't delete it. I just hide it with the eye here. We have the collection for the helpers. Let's create a new collection by clicking this button over here. Let's call it car. And if this is selected and we add new objects, all the new objects will be added to this collection. So let's collapse the helpers. Now let's hit Shift A, mesh, and add a cube. This will be the foundation for our car, since we always need an object to start modeling. Let's rename the cube to car as well. And now let's switch over to modeling, since we don't need the timeline at the bottom of our screen. And now we want to model the car, but a car is mainly a symmetrical object, so it wouldn't make sense to model both sides of the car. It would be just a waste of time. We only want to model one side and the other should be mirrored using a mirror modifier. In order to mirror this, let's delete one side of the cube. Let's press 3, not the numpad 3, the other one. These are two different things in Blender. To select the face selection, select one face, press X and delete the vertices. That means not only the face will be deleted, but also all connected faces and edges. Make sure that one side here is on the red X-axis, because if I press numpad 1 from the front view, this here should be one side of the car. If you deleted the wrong one, hit Ctrl Z and delete the right one. So now let's go to the modifiers, add modifier and add the mirror modifier. The mirror modifier uses the origin as mirroring axis. And right now we are mirroring along the X-axis, as you can see. If you want to mirror along another axis, you can change it over here. But for further information about the mirror modifier, watch the mirror modifier tutorial. Alright, now let's get started. First of all, I press 1 to select vertex selection, select everything and simply press S and scale this a bit smaller. Now let's get to the front view, and now it's a bit hard to see only the flat view here and still get an understanding of the 3D shape. So either you pick up the quad view, which I was explaining in an earlier video, or you simply split the view as I do here. Over here we can press T to hide the tool shelf, and let's use a 3D view over here. That means in this 3D view we get a good idea of the car shape in general, and over here this we use for modeling. That means we can also make this over here a bit smaller. And now we are basically building the side, the front, the top and so on, as if we would glue different cardboard pieces together. One important thing before we start, I quickly extrude this, and now imagine I want to select this up here and move this around, maybe in the Z-axis, and it looks like everything is fine. But as you can see in the 3D view, I only selected the two front vertices and not the ones in the back. But I want to be able to select the whole thing here and select the whole top of this cube. And that's why we need to enable one option. Let's go up here and press middle mouse button, the mouse wheel, and move your mouse around, or simply scroll the mouse wheel. That's also possible. Because we can't see all options here, let's scroll to the right, and here we have this button, and this allows us to also see and select vertices which are on the other side. So if I now press B and select the top here, you can see the whole top was selected. What I don't like is this extreme transparent look here. We can change this by going to shading and increase the X-ray value to 1. So it's still kind of transparent, but the whole shape looks a bit more solid. Let's press Alt-A, select one side and delete it, since we don't want to have this right now. So I press A to select everything and move it over here so that it is somehow on the side of the car. And then let's start with numpad 3 from the right view. by building up the side shape here without the top part and without the holes for the wheels here. So first of all, I press G and move it over here. Then I select one vertex, press G and move it down here. And now I try to recreate the shape here. Keep in mind, we are keeping it very simple here. Personally, I like to work with vertex selection only most of the time. Certainly, if you want to select an edge, you can press 2 on the keyboard and select the whole edge. But for me, it's simple to just select one vertex and then shift the other one, or use the box selection. Then I press E to extrude. And now let's take a look at the different shapes here. And really, we want to keep it simple. That means for now, let's try to cover the main shape here. So let's select these two, press E for extruding, and let's hit Y for locking this along the Y-axis. I think since we have local transform orientation enabled, it locks in this axis first, but by pressing Y twice, it will lock along the global axis here. So let's go to this point, press E again. So I only try to add cuts where they are really necessary. Something like this. We can add more cuts later on if we need them, but for now that's pretty enough, since we want to bend or curve this a bit, and the more cuts we have, the more vertices, the faster it gets ugly. So let's get to front view, and now let's press Ctrl R, move our mouse to the front here so that we are basically intersecting one vertical line here, and then we have this yellow line which is a new cut. Let's press left click to add this cut and move this up a bit. Then let's press Ctrl R again and set another cut over here. And now we can select the face selection, press C for example, scroll the mouse wheel, and now hold down left click and paint over this area basically, and hold down middle mouse click to remove vertices. Press right click to remove this circle from your cursor, and now we can basically press G and move it to the side a bit. Here we can select everything, press G and move everything a bit closer to the car. Then let's take a look from top view. Actually, as you can see, we can move stuff around a bit. So press Alt A, vertex selection, and let's select these here and move them a bit to the side by pressing G, Alt A, select this one here. Now I press R for rotating this a bit so that I get the shape, and the same thing over here. So just G and R for positioning. We can adjust further shapes later on. For now, we just want to create the basis of the car. Then let's select this area here, numpad 1. You can see that the top view, the front view and the side view not 100% matches each other, but it really doesn't matter. We want to create a shape of a car which is looking nice. So the front here is selected. Now let's press E for extruding and X for locking along the X-axis. And as you can see, I can go simply over to the mirrored side, and it would cause some visual errors if these faces would lie above each other. So, and it would be really painful to put each vertex over to the center here. And that's why we can enable clipping in the mirror modifier settings under the modifiers. And clipping basically means, if I now press G, X for moving along the X-axis, that it basically glues this stuff together here in the center. So, and if I now, after confirming the position, now try to move something around here from the center, I can't move it away unless I disable clipping, then it works again. So let's do the same thing for the other side. Let's select the back here, Control numpad 1, press E, X and move it to the center. Now let's select these here. Top view, press E, X, move it over here. And then to close the open holes, let's make this window a bit bigger since we are working here quite much. Let's select these two vertices or this edge and press F. Then this open hole will be closed. Same thing I do over here. Now let's do the same thing on the bottom. Let's press E, X, move it over here, and then let's close these two open holes. Don't forget to save from time to time. Control Shift S. And now you can see I have already saved in different versions, and I don't want to overwrite version 3, so I click the plus button, then it will increase the number here, and then we can save this as new version. In this video we go on with modeling the car body by adding the top part and refining the shape. Alright, now we wanna create the top part here. So as you can see, I basically want to extrude the faces which are up here, but we are missing a loop here in order to make the right extrusion. So let's press Ctrl R, add a loop cut over here, click once again, and now as you can see we have loops as we need them. Let's press 3 for face selection, select these two faces, and now simply press E to extrude it. Then let's press S for scaling, Y for the Y-axis, and scale it a bit smaller. The most important thing we are missing is all the roundish edges and corners. And also if we take a look from the top view, we have this bending here in the windshield, and we also have a bending in the front here and in the back here. So what we need is another loop cut, and I think let's add 2. So if I press Ctrl R and scroll the mouse wheel once, you can see I can increase the loops. Now I press left click and again left click to place them here directly in the center. Now let's press 1 for vertex selection, and let's click once to deselect everything. Select these here, press G, Y for moving it along the Y-axis. Then let's select these here, press G, Y, move it a bit, and the same with these here. What I would also do is to select these edges over here, press G and just move them slightly to the inside so we have a little bit more a roundish edge here. But in general we will keep it really edgy and rough. Let's do the same thing with the front shield. Let's select this one here. Something like this. Same with the back here. And here as well. And over here, let's move these edges by pressing double G for sliding it along the edges a little bit to the inside. So it feels a bit more roundish. So now let's take a look at the front view. We can see up here that's not looking so nice. So in the front view, you can see the upper part here is not fitting at the moment. So let's first of all move this up a bit and also to the inside. And on the edge here, let's move it down a bit. And the same over here. Let's select this edge here. Make sure to grab everything and move it a little bit more to the inside. Maybe we should also move the whole thing a bit more over here. And same with the thing down here. Make sure that you have everything selected. So check the 3D view here. Press G, X and move it a bit to the side. So now let's take a closer look to all the details here. For example, this one here is not fitting. As you can see, the windshield here is pretty straight. So I will leave a small bending, I think, but not too much. Then let's take a look from the side. Also over here, I would probably add a little bit more by just moving these edges a bit. So it just feels a bit more polished. Then let's select the hood here and move it up a bit, something like this. And let's do the same thing for the trunklet here. Move it up a bit. So this finer adjustments happens all the time. So you will never create something which is perfect by the first time you place a vertex somewhere. And I also want to create the windows here and the door basically. So I don't want to like extrude the door or anything, but for later on that we can like color the door in different color, it's important that we have an edge going around here. So what I do, let's select this one here, move it over here a bit. so that we roughly follow the shape of the door. Then press Ctrl R to add a loop over here. And if you want to straighten a loop, press S for scaling. In this case, it's the Y axis, so I press Y and then simply press 0 on the keyboard, enter. And now you can see it basically scaled all onto one line. So it's way easier for us now to adjust this. So now for the bottom line of the door, let's add another loop cut, Ctrl R, and move it down a bit. Then I select this vertex here, press double G to slide it along the edges. If we like, we can add another loop cut here to add a little bit of bending on the hood here, since we also have the little bit of bending here on the backlit. And what I also would do is to take a look from the front view, select these here, press Z for the Z axis and move them up a bit. So we also have this kind of bending over here. And maybe we can move these here down a bit. This will make the shape of the car much more convenient to look at. So now let's add the windows. So basically I won't add real windows here. I won't add an interior of the car. So we keep it really simple, but we want to place a foundation for adding materials later on. And this we can do by using the Inset Face tool or simply by pressing I. So let's press 3 for face selection. Select these 3 faces here, press I and move it to the inside. You can see up here we have a value which is changing. So if I just type in, for example, let's check, maybe something like this, 0.03, enter. But now you can see that we also have this line here in the center, which we don't want. But if, for example, I turn off the mirror modifier, you can see that basically the original mesh has an open edge here. And that's why we can open the operator panel and disable boundary. Keep in mind, the operator panel only appears directly after you confirmed an operation. So if you don't have this Inset Face operator panel down here anymore, you basically have to redo this and do it once again. Watch the operator panel video for further information. So let's turn on the mirror modifier again, and now you can see this one here is open and not closed. And now let's take a look from the side. Basically we have one other window over here. Press I, 0.03. So we have the exact same value as for the front shield. Let's do the same thing over here. And the same thing over here. So, and as you can see, Blender remembers the setting we have used the last time, so we don't need to unshake boundary. So let's take a look from the side. I think we can move the top a bit down. So let's press 1 for the vertex selection, move this a bit down, and maybe this a bit down. Maybe we can add another loop cut over here to move this up on this edge. And we can see that the windows are a bit smaller, so we don't want to make this super realistic, but let's select all these vertices here, press double G and slide them down a bit. And I would also do the same thing on the back side here. And the same thing on the windshield here. Let's move it out a bit, and the same thing over here as well. So maybe we can move these two parts a bit away from each other as well. So when we take a look at this car has this weird shape in front of here. You can see it here as well, and here on this reference image. And we also want to do something similar like this. So let's press 3 for face selection. Let's select this two here, and then press E for extruding this and S for scaling this down a bit. And as you can see here, let's move it over just a bit. And maybe let's make this higher. So press Ctrl plus to increase the selection. Press S for scaling, Z for the Z axis, and scale this up a bit. And with G, let's move it up a bit. In this video, we will finalize the car body by adding holes for the wheels and refining the shape. Alright guys, we have matched the shape of the car pretty good, except some smaller details, but there's one important thing missing, and these are the holes for the wheels here. And there are different approaches on how you can do it. One way would be, for example, to use the knife tool and simply cut in these edges over here. So for setting up the edges, this would work pretty good. But what's a bit problematic here is to basically extrude it to the inside. So if I, for example, select these faces, press E, you can see that we have some trouble. So we need to delete a few faces. Then we need to re-merge some faces and edges and vertices. So that's not super quick and easy. What I would rather do is to create two shapes which have the shape of the holes here and then just carve them into the car. So we can easily do this. So let's take the 3D cursor tool, click somewhere here beside the car, press Shift A in edit mode. So we will add a new shape in edit mode, not in object mode. Add a cylinder. And as you can see, the cylinder is